All righty. Give me 1 second here, boys. I'm getting everything spun up here real quick. Got that. BTS, what's up, buddy? Yellow, exciting if true. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Let me double check all my settings here because I haven't streamed in a while, so I want to make sure that, okay, everything's good to go here. All right, cool. All right, so let's see what comes of this here. To recap, for those of you just now joining us, I'm going to pull a lot of this stuff up here. There was 2 or 3 different things that I saw here. The first couple of them didn't look super credible at first. Let me see. I'm going to try and get them pulled up here. Because like I said, I just kind of up and jumped on this. Okay, so Cam Robinson, who is a relatively credible guy of note, Hertl owns a modified no trade clause where he can provide a 3 clubs he'll accept a trade to, just like the no trade clause that Burns had on his current expiring contract. So he does have to accept a trade to come to Carolina. Let's see what else we got here. KK is going to have to be part of this deal, man. I'm going to hate to see him go, but kind of figure it was inevitable. David Edigui, he wrote something in French that said Hertl échange à la Caroline, which translates to English as, yes, Grok, translate the Hertl traded to Carolina. And it didn't look like much at first, but then Marco D'Amico, who is, I think it's actually pronounced D'Amico, who is following up on this, saying it looks like that the previous account I just mentioned was first on this. Let's see if this trade goes through. Would be quite the pickup for Carolina. It's it's definitely an upgrade. I as much as I love KK, I'm not gonna pretend that Hertl is a worse player than KK. That's just factually incorrect. Also, I'm still waking up a little bit, so if I babble like I'm stupid a little bit more than normal, let me get this energy drink in me, and it might not be so bad. And I'm sorry I haven't really posted or streamed a bunch lately anyway, because I've actually kind of been enjoying just taking a break from this stuff, because I know that come July 1st and everything leading up to everything during the off season leading up to training camp, there's going to be a whole lot to talk about. As painfully long as hockey off season feels, it's actually not that long, especially for the players and the trainers and stuff, because they only get a couple of weeks off and then they're right back to getting ready. Let's see what else we got here. Josh Epifanio, who might we be giving up? I think KK is going in that trade, I would imagine. I need to see. Let me go on Puckpedia and see what Vegas's projected cap space is, because if they're making this move, they're doing it to clear cap space so that they can get Marner. If this move goes through, don't be surprised if Vegas trades Marner's right or trades for Marner's rights from Toronto. Actually, KK might not be going the other way in this trade, because that wouldn't help them cap-wise a whole lot. I'm pulling up Vegas right now, because their projected cap space for Vegas is only $9.62 million. That's not going to be enough to get Marner. So if they're moving Hertl out, we might be getting him strictly for futures if it. Okay, there we go. We're back now. All right. Yeah, I don't think now that I'm looking at their cap space, because I actually didn't know what their projected cap space was. Their projected cap space is currently 9,615,000. So that's about 5 million ish at least dollars short of what Marner's going to ask for. Should this go through? So maybe it's not going to be a roster player of any kind because they need to get that entire cap hit off the books and not bring anything back. Charles Smith says -3 on a first place team, Michael and Stone +20 and +30ish. Plus minus is one of those stats that I've never been a really big believer in, especially not since the lockout, because everything changed after the lockout. Plus minus is a very, very deceptive stat, in my opinion. It's like RBIs in baseball. There's been a lot of great players who have minuses that aren't purely offensive and everything. Hertl's got a really good 200-foot game. He's a good skater. He's a good playmaker. He's not going to provide you a ton of goals, probably. I am going to look at his stats just to, because I know a decent amount about Hertl, but I don't know as much about him as other guys that I've been wanting Carolina to potentially go get. But plus minus is one of those things I just don't put a whole lot of stock in. All right, so these are his playoff stats. I want to pull up his regular season ones here. All right, so 252 goals, 297 assists for 549 points, -76. A lot of that he was on the Sharks. So when it comes to plus minus, I'm a firm believer that unless it's inordinately low or inordinately high, it doesn't really accurately portray a player. So if a guy's only -3, that actually doesn't bother me a whole lot, especially if he's a penalty killer and especially if he's used on the power play. Reason being is when you get a plus on the power play, it doesn't count towards your plus minus, but ultimately it's still a net positive. And, you know, you're going to give up goals when you're killing penalties, even if you're as good at it as, say, the Hurricanes are. There's still going to be the potential for that. Jordan Stahl last year was a Selke finalist, and his minus, he was, I'll tell you in 2 seconds, he actually had a not the greatest plus minus last year, but that's just a stat I don't put a lot of stock in for a multitude of reasons. And one day I'm actually going to do a video project on it as to why I don't think it's good. So Jordan Stahl was a Selke finalist last year, and he was -14, and he only had 30 points. So let's see what else we got here. Caniac Sessions reposted the stream. Thank you, Griff. I appreciate it, buddy. Reese Bailey says, I'm not sure if KK is going the other way. If Vegas were trading him, it would be purely to open up cap space for Marner. Yeah, that's why I retracted what I said, that I thought that KK was going the other way. Unless Carolina retains salary on him, which I don't see that happening either. Maybe a little bit. Maybe they'll retain like 10%. But even then, I would say that that's a long shot. Jay, what's up, buddy? Welcome to the show. If it's Jankowski or Suzuki in a first, it would be amazing. Keep Blake on the roster for a bigger trade. Yeah, I like Jackson Blake, but ever since Logan Stankoven got acquired, you know, it's like that kind of makes Blake, for lack of a better term, expendable on the trade market and everything. And I like Jackson Blake. I think his game has a long way to go, but this team has got to get some size. Oh, here we go with this again. Chance says trade Sean Walker. No, do not trade Sean Walker. Don't listen to Chance. Chance, I like having you here, but you and I are never going to agree on that one, buddy. I love Sean Walker. BTS says Vegas always finds a way to trade for a player that's way out of their cap space. Yeah, and this is one of those situations where it's going to be kind of like a few years ago when they traded Holla and Dylan Coughlin. Everyone knows how much I liked him for future considerations just to make cap space and everything like that. So, or no, I take that back. That was Nicolas Waugh they traded for Eric Hall. And Max Pacioretty was the future considerations trade. I don't think it's going to be a future considerations thing. Vegas is going to want some sort of assets, whether, you know, it's probably futures of some sort, picks or prospects or anything like that. But don't worry about Nikishin getting traded. Don't worry about Nadeau getting traded, honestly, in a situation like this. I don't think either. I think Rod really likes Nadeau, and the front office is taking that into account, and I don't think that they're going to let him go either. Slavin is our GOAT says, if we sign another top six left wing like Ehlers, our top six will be electric. Yeah. And I'm going to do an Ehlers stream at some point or another. I started putting the slides together, but like I said, I was just kind of burnt out on streaming and stuff, guys. I just needed a little bit of a break because I'd rather take a break now then be really heavy during free agency, do some stuff during the offseason, and then next year, depending on what my situation is with this job that I'm potentially going to have, I'm going to try and do landfall hour and damage report for nearly every single game except for the 5 or 6 that I'm going to be able to attend. So Josh Epifanio says 32 goals last year. Yeah, that's a good thing. Jesus Christ, 789 people. Thank you guys. Reese Bailey says Rasmus Anderson was a minus 38 last season. Half the league wants him. Yeah, plus minus is not a good stat. I've always thought that they need to change the way they record it and make it like either strictly 5-on-5 or record it for every single situation. So record their plus minus during power play situations. If you want to loop 5-on-4 together with 5-on-3 and everything like that and 4-on-3, go ahead and do it. If you want to do the same thing for the penalty kill, do it. I just don't think it's a good stat to look at in isolation, and it doesn't really paint a good picture of a player, because there's plenty of players who have minuses that are good players and contribute to their teams. And on the other side of that, there's plenty of players that are plus 175 and provide next to no offense, i.e. Jacob Slavin. And that particular stat does paint a picture for him that, like, okay, yeah, this guy is good defensively, but no matter how hard the stat bros try, and I do believe in a lot of stats, especially I like a lot of the advanced analytics, you will never quantify defense with numbers in hockey. It is just not possible. People try and do it all the time, and they say, oh, but they do it in baseball. Okay, well, it's completely different. Baseball is one action, one consequence, one result. In hockey's played in a pinball machine. It's not like that. And Dylan Bollinger says, we excited for Hertl more than Marner? I think so, because if Carolina doesn't get Marner, which I've been off the Marner train for a while now, when the stuff started coming out about him potentially only wanting a 4-year deal, I was like, okay, that's actually not bad. I wouldn't be upset if Carolina threw that much money at Marner and it was for shorter term. My concern was how well that contract was going to age. Whereas with Ehlers, and when I do the Ehlers stream, if I get around to it, I'll be able to go into a lot better detail about it. Nikolai Ehlers is one of those players that when he gets older, he slows down a little bit and his offense falls off. You can still drop him down into the bottom 6, have him killing penalties, and he'll still be an effective player. And he'll be significantly more cost-effective at that point because the cap will have gone up. By the time Ehlers is playing that type of role, 3, 4, maybe even longer, 3 or 4 seasons from now, you're still getting a lot of bang for your buck with Ehlers. Now, that's not to say that Marner isn't a capable penalty killer. He absolutely is. Seeing him and Aho kill penalties together would be great if Jarvis isn't out there with Aho doing it still. But the biggest deterrent I had for Marner was, like, that is a really, really big investment to make for someone who is potentially not going to give us a return on it long term. You know, if you pay Ehlers $8.5-9 million, which is where I think he'll land for his, which is about where he'll land for a player of his type and everything, I think that, you know, down the line, he'll still be an effective player for that amount of money, because, you know, paying a guy $9 million now, in 4 or 5 seasons, the cap's going to go up $16 to $20 million. So that's going to be pennies compared to what it looks like he's getting paid now in terms of the percentage of the cap he's going to get. Slavin Observed Goat says, I think Blake is going the other way and we dump KK somewhere else for future considerations or scraps. Yeah, I don't want to see KK go. Everyone knows how big of a KK fan I am. But I don't think him and Rod get along on a professional level. I don't think that Rod really trusts him in a lot of situations, because it seems like KK's on a shorter leash than a lot of other players. And sometimes 1,022 people, damn. I don't think that he's going to, I personally don't think that KK is ever going to really take the next step in Carolina. It looked like he was going to in the 22-23 season, and he's never captured that second playoff run again. I think that he needs to go somewhere where he can definitively have a third-line center role. That's why I always thought if he went to San Jose or Chicago or somewhere like that, a team that he literally cannot make worse, then he'll be able to get into that role, have those type of line mates, and his game will flourish. And KK is not the first case of a player being drafted to be a top 6 center and it not working out. And in Carolina, there's really no room for him because Jordan Staal plays that role and KK doesn't. And I've had some people disagree with me that KK can't play that role here. I think he can. He's not going to be as good defensively as Jordo, but, you know, his net positive would come through what offense he does provide. And I think with line mates that are not skill guys, but more crash and bang, dump and chase type of players, grinders and everything like that, he would, in fact, be the play driver for guys like that a little bit more. And he's a decent play driver now, but it's like he is either on the second line in Carolina, which doesn't work, or he's on the fourth line in Carolina, which also does not work because he's making way too much money. And honestly, he's way too good to be a fourth line center. So, it doesn't look that way considering how good Mark Jankowski was coming in and everything like that in that fourth line center role. But the one thing the Hurricanes are missing more than anything that they can't go out on the market and get is another top six center, and Hertl could be that guy. Dylan Bollinger says, keep Janko, let Blakey go. I can see something like that happening. I really can. I'm waiting to see what goes on here because Hertl does have a no movement clause, so we'll see what happens here. We don't need Blake with Stank and Nadeau, not going to lie. Yeah, this team's got to get some size on it. That's one of the reasons why I was like, give up half the farm to get Tage Thompson if you can, or Dylan Larkin or someone like that. Like, make a big trade, but this is not as big of a trade as either one of those two would be. But damn, I would be really happy if they acquired a player like that. I really would. Only way to move Walker is if we make a deal for Dobson, says Raban. Yeah, and even then I wouldn't do it. Walker's contract is too good. He only makes $3.6 million, and if you put him with Slavin, I think he'll turn into a 35 or 40-point player. I really do. I know I elaborated on that in the past, and people are like, oh, he's a bum and all this other stuff. He's barely a third-pair guy, and that's not fair to Sean Walker. Sean Walker is a very complete player, and he was doing the safety valve stuff for Ghost, so he couldn't really open up that offensive side of his game, but we saw those select sample sizes where he was with Slavin. He was putting up a lot of points. The best part about it is Slavin and Walker would be the first pair to go out there for a bump-up shift after a power play, and they would kill penalties together so you can keep the lines rolling a little bit more fluid and keep everything consistent back there, which was part of the rationale of trading Tony DeAngelo out and bringing Brent Burns in, because Burns could kill penalties when DeAngelo couldn't, and everyone knows that I really like Tony. So there's also that. It's those types of things to consider. If Burns and Orlov go, who is the D-man we need to go after? There's if Aaron Ekblad hits the market, that would be my number one target. If you can't get Aaron Ekblad, I would say go get Rasmus Anderson, who there's a lot of buzz around him right now, and Carolina's been linked to him on several occasions, and I think that would be more likely to happen. Option 3, people are going to get pissed at me for this, but I don't care. It's what I think, and you guys are always going to know what's actually on my mind. I would just bring Tony DeAngelo back. He's cheap, and he can put up a lot of points when he's with Slavin 5-on-5, and he doesn't have to go out there and kill penalties. There's 5 other guys on the chart ahead of him that can do that. Not every single player is going to be a defensive stalwart, and you can't win that way. It's like I've said multiple times. One of my biggest criticisms of Brendan Moore, it seems like he expects every player to be a Selke candidate, and if that's just not possible, it's not in this day and age. You can't do it. Grant is king. What's up, buddy? Yeah, Grant Holmes. I love that guy. Kenny Powers in real life. Who else would we try to go for if we don't acquire Hertl? I don't know. The market on available centers is really thin, and the two that I want to get the most are probably not available. But, I have several dream acquisitions. You know who I would really love to have, but I know that he's not on the block, is Robert Thomas in St. Louis. I would absolutely love to have Robert Thomas, but there's absolutely no way St. Louis is going to give him up. If they do, they're signaling rebuild, and they're not in a position where they need to do that yet. So Dylan says, so Ehlers, Hertl, another D-man, I'd be happy with the offseason. Yeah, and for all this talk around potentially bringing Burns back, if the Hurricanes add 3 forwards, of which they're all in the top 6, a center and 2 wingers, then that negates the negativity that would come of bringing Burns back, in my opinion, because you dump most of the money into the forwards and all that type of stuff. I just have my concerns about, okay, they try Burns with Goss to spare. That doesn't work out. Burns is back with Slavin, and then the defense is right back where it started last season. So that's the only thing. Dylan Bollinger says, well, Nicky was -4 in a game all because of Orlov. Yeah, game 3 versus the Panthers. I know what you're talking about. Rolling SKNY. I'll just call you Rolling, buddy. Welcome to the show. If you need any data, check out Sports-Wise by Rolling Insights. It has historical data and the draft info from previous years. Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Thank you. Ramon says 5-on-5 can also get skewed when a power play is killed, but the team immediately scores. Yeah, 5-on-5, but players still disadvantaged and out of position. Yeah, Trip Tracy has said on many occasions, and, for all the heat Trip Tracy gets, he knows hockey, and he's a very smart guy. Is he the best at communicating it sometimes, and does he say weird things sometimes that are innuendous without intent? Absolutely. But one of the most profound things he's ever said, and I never hear anybody else talk about it, a power play actually continues until the next whistle after it expires. And that is totally true. Aaliyah Yasmin says, if we get Ehlers and Hertl, I'd say it's a successful offseason. I would also say that a moderately successful offseason, but there's still room for like one more top 6 forward they could get, one more. And the prospect pool is loaded. There's plenty of guys they can afford to give up. And by the time the Hurricanes are out of this competitive window, then they're going to have time to restack their draft picks, refill their prospect pool, all that type of stuff. Essentially, this window is open for the duration of Aho's contract. Now, we have to start planning the future. That's why me and Matthew Powell were talking about, acquiring someone like Mason West in the draft so you can start grooming somebody to take that next step at center. Because what I see happening when Aho's contract is over, I see him signing another short-term deal with the Hurricanes and dropping down into a middle 6 role when he's older and slowed down a little bit and still being a really effective player in that regard. But you have to plan that far out. Now, it gets to the point where it's like, okay, it's game 60. Let's make a trade. Let's give up an asset for the future to get something for now. And there's plenty of those types of situations that do occur. And once you get, but if you're looking at projecting out long term, you do have to plan, how do I replace Sebastian Aho when he's playing in a more limited role, so on and so forth. That was part of the rationale, I think, behind KK, was to eventually replace Jordo. But BTSS, what are our Ekblad chances? I think he's staying in Florida. I think they're going to find a way to make it work, because it sounds to me like they're willing to let Ekblad go to keep Bennett if they have to, but I think that they're going to find a way to keep them both. I really do. The no state income tax is an advantage. I don't give a damn what Gary Bettman says. I'm not going to get political on this channel or anything about my views on taxes or anything like that, but it is a factor. So him saying that it's a non-issue honestly, it's bullshit, and he's lying. He's heavily misinformed. He's out of touch. Either way, he's not telling the truth. Anybody who can do basic fucking arithmetic can tell that that is a problem, and it factors in on why players will sign somewhere that they won't sign anywhere else. Maybe they can do an adjustment for that. I won't say what I really think would solve that problem, but I'm going to leave that alone. Walker will probably be next to Slavin next season. Yeah, I would love to see that. That saves a ton of money that way too, because then, the top pair is costing you less than $10 million at that point, and that's a good situation to be in. And like I said, I think Walker's offensive, well, Slavin's for that matter as well, but Walker's offensive upside will jump up from there and everything. So let's see if we got any other updates over here in regards to the Hertl trade and everything like that. Let me do a quick search here. Tomas Hertl's cap hit is only $6.75 million, I believe. San Jose is retaining the rest. Let me double check that on Puckpedia, because that sounds right. Because I remember when they traded for him initially, and everyone couldn't believe that a trade like that happened in the division, but San Jose was so far out of contention at that point that it really didn't matter. So he has an $8,137,500 cap hit. So a little over $8 million. He's in year 4 of 8, so it'll be 5 of 8 when this season starts. UFA 2030 at age 36, so that's not terrible either. 17.05% of contract was retained by the San Jose Sharks. So the actual cap hit that he has against Vegas, let's see. That can't be right. Hold on. 9.86% of the cap. Let's see. Slump says Blake is going to be goated one day. I think he will thrive under a different system than Carolina's. Yeah, and he's a decent fit here. It's just more so if the guy was a few inches taller, I would say let's pump the brakes on potentially trading him. But Stankoven's not going anywhere. That kid's the future. When I look at a player like Jackson Blake, I think maybe he's going to be in the top 6. Maybe. The floor for him is being a top 9 winger, and the ceiling for him is being in the top 6. Stankoven, on the other hand, I think his ceiling is significantly higher. Ramon says Burns will be back over TDA. I agree that that's what will happen, but I personally wouldn't like that. But I would see Burns coming back before Tony DeAngelo. Hertl would actually be pretty good. I think so too. I really do. Denver Card Show says Tony D is the piss and vinegar we need. It always seems to work with him here. Yeah, and when they brought him back last time, people were saying that he was brought back to be a seventh defenseman and all this other stuff. You don't pay. Okay, first off, seventh defensemen are typically good defensively, which, I'm not going to pretend that he's good defensively. He's not. He's good at possessing the puck. He's good at generating offense. And I've never seen somebody pass a puck as well as Tony does. But you don't have a guy like that be your seventh defenseman. He plays a role in your mainstay lineup. And additionally, like, a seventh defenseman also doesn't make $1.6 million. They typically make $850, $950K at the most. So there was this whole thing where they were going to trade Pesci to Nashville, and it fell through. So there were plans to have Tony in the lineup full time. So it just didn't happen that way. Baker says, what do you think about Robertson? You think Carolina has a chance? Yes, I do. Because of the whole Mikko Rantanen thing, Jason Robertson is probably going to have to get moved. There's no way Dallas is going to fit all its guys underneath the cap. It's just mathematically not possible. Even if he takes another short-term bridge deal for less, I don't see any way that they can fit him in with the limited amount of cap space they have. And there's plenty of extra. Excuse me. Let me give a couple of sips of this. There's plenty of extra future assets that Carolina can use to get someone like Jason Robertson, and Dallas make the room that they need to make to sign all the players they need to sign. Because I think they have like 4 or 5 players left to sign, and they don't have a whole lot of money to do it with. Jess Drake says maybe not what, but I'll entertain that. But or either that, or she was replying to somebody else. We need more swagger and more grit / size. We definitely need some more grit and size. Absolutely. Baker says, I don't like Burns anymore. I still like Burns. I just don't see him being an effective player on a contending team. He can still play at the NHL level, but he's going to have to go somewhere else to do that, in my opinion. If they bring him back and they manage to bring 3 forwards in to make the team better, then the team in front of him is a little bit better. That's going to mitigate some of the problems that he has, and he will ultimately be an effective player that saves the Hurricanes money. I'm still personally against bringing him back, but it's like not the end of the world if they do, so long as they make the lineup better in other spots. Jay, what's up, buddy? D'Amico is now walking back to Canes as the destination for Hertl. God damn it. Caniac Sessions Hertl's cap hit is only 6.75. That's not bad. San Jose's retaining 17.5%. That's correct. Rolling Sky, what about goaltending? Are we confident that Freddie can do it? Freddie's biggest adversary is his health. When Freddie is healthy and he's feeling good and he's playing 100%, he's lights out a lot of the time. Kochekov, I hoped he was taking that next step to say, all right, you are the future. You are the starter. And for the first half or so of the season, he did, and then he fell off a cliff. And then he played poorly in the playoffs, minus the game he came in for to relieve Freddie when Timo Meier totally didn't injure him accidentally on purpose. There's a multitude of different things there with the goaltending. I know that John Gibson has been thrown around a whole lot, but that's another guy that does have injury issues. But I'm not going to pretend that Kochekov's a better goalie than Gibson. He's not. If they could make that work, that's fine. But the only thing about it is Gibson, I think, only has 2 years left on his contract, and that would make that a little bit more difficult as well. Colby McLam just joined, so don't know what's been covered, but Hertl would help a lot on the power play. That too. And then you could bump somebody down to power play too and make that lethal. It's good to front load the top power play unit, but teams that win Stanley Cups, I think they have 2 effective units. You make everything effective. Your penalty kill from top to bottom. Carolina doesn't have that problem. The goaltending has got to come through for Carolina. If they can get a lethal, add some lethality to that second power play unit and pick up the slack where power play 1 falls short, that's going to do nothing but be helpful. Cornbread says, where did you get the flag / warning flag thing you have on the wall? It looks awesome. So when we lived in Virginia, there was a guy, I think his name was Kevin Bull, who makes those, and my girlfriend had that made for me. And yeah, it looks really good. I absolutely love it. If you can find someone who does the rustic woodwork and stuff like that and everything like that, they make ones like that are just really damn cool. Another thing I'm going to do eventually, I'll show it to you guys real quick. If you can see up there, that indenture in the ceiling right there, I'm actually going to get 16 wood warning flags made, and I'm going to hang them up there. and I'm going to cover them up during the playoffs. And then every time the Canes win a game, I'm going to pull the cover off of it, kind of like what they do at Lenovo. I'm going to do something like that up there. So I got some more plans for this room, but right now it's just got the basic stuff in it. BTS says Cam Robinson is now backtracking on X. Oh, God, please don't tell me we got March minted again. Matthew Brown, what's up, buddy? Praying Ehlers, Paterka, or Tage Thompson news coming soon to Carolina. I legitimately believe with all my heart that Carolina is going to land Ehlers. I really do. JJ Paterka, I don't think does much to move the needle. He would definitely, he's a good player, don't get me wrong. But, when we've already got Stankoven potentially still having Blake, and if you sign Ehlers, you've already got a lot of lethality with the wings, especially if Svechnikov hasn't moved out, which I've made my position on that abundantly clear. The only way I'm okay with Svechnikov getting moved out is if a second line center is coming back the other way, and even then I'd have some reluctance. I know a lot of people have been down on Svechnikov, but the way that he played in the playoffs, I think that he's finally reinvented his game a little bit because he's a little bit slower now. I think he's 0.79 miles per hour slower on average, according to the NHL Edge data. It was something like that since he came back from the surgery. And people are like, oh, that's not that much. That is a world of difference in any sport, whether it's, it's like take nearly a mile per hour of speed away from a hockey player. That is very detrimental to their game. Try and steal a base being a mile per hour slower as a baseball player. It's going to be hard. Same thing like if you're a running back in football. There's all kinds, comparisons you can make there. So Tony D, what's up, dude? I'm currently on break at work. About 10 minutes left. Okay, cool. Good to see you, pal. Hopefully Hertl still comes to Raleigh, but not much we can do if he doesn't waive his NMC. Yeah, it's totally in his control, so we'll see. Slavin as our goat says Cam Robinson just tweeted that the Canes have no trades in place. Fuck. Don't tell me I got on here for nothing. Baker says Carolina can actually get a really good team if they play their cards well in offseason. A lot of room in the cap and many first-round picks to use in trades. Yeah, all thanks to the Mikko Rantanen trade. And Carolina is really, really smart about their future assets. That's kind of to their detriment at times in real time once in a while. Reason being is because, there's times where for years Canes fans call, make a move at the deadline, make a move at the deadline, make a move at the deadline. Well, there's two things about that. One, Carolina and whoever the other party is has to agree to the trade. And two, a lot of people forget about this. The league has to approve trades. For example, when Pittsburgh traded for Derek Brassard back in 17-18, the initial trade they had in place, both sides agreed to it, but the league stepped in and said, no, this is way too lopsided. It's not going to happen. So the Penguins had to redo their end of the bargain to make it work. So Cavery says the trade is in the smoke. Diamacchio said a deal might be done on Saturday. Damn it. Tried to find the same magic as the night we traded for Rantanen. Yeah, I'm saving all my manifest posts for the actual season and probably free agency as well. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping something comes of this. I'm looking to see some other stuff here. All right, but we will talk about Tomas Hertl here a little bit. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can do the... It's hard to do this with only one monitor, so please forgive me if it doesn't work out the way that it should. One second, guys. Okay. All right, let me check on something here. Trying to make this work. All right, we'll just have to do the entire screen here. Okay. All right, here, we'll just do it this way. It's hard to do this with only one monitor. Okay. Stats. I had Jordo pulled up there for a reason. Let's see. All right, we'll turn that off for the time being until there's something to talk about there. Raban says league will never veto a Vegas trade. So far, they haven't. They've let them just dump all the cap that they want to. And, like one thing that I think would maybe eventually deter people going to Vegas is the fact that, like, they do treat their players like that. They dump them in a lot of cases without a second thought and for not even good returns just to get the cap off the books. But when you go to Vegas, you have a legitimate chance to win. So I think that, it's kind of a risk versus reward. And, people are going to take the payoff. It's like if you're one of, 18 players on that roster, likeliness is like you're not going to be the guy that's moved. It's a 1 in 18 chance, maybe a little bit higher depending on if you're a bottom 6 forward depth piece or a bottom pair defenseman or something like that. But that even their star players or even their higher end players, it seems like they'll dump them without a second thought in a lot of occasions. Duquette Benjamin says Marner too. Yeah. Denver card shows. What's up, buddy? Honest question: why do younger guys not seem to want to be in Carolina? Vets with families seem to love it as a destination. Man, we have a tough time with attracting younger guys. So I do think that there's an element of truth to that. When compared to a lot of the other big cities, like, okay, for example, this is not me trying to shit on Raleigh or anything. When me and my girlfriend were looking at places that we wanted to live, Raleigh was on the short list at one point, and we ruled it out pretty quick because we were either going to go to Tucson, Arizona. There was a couple places in Florida that we talked about going to, and ultimately we landed in Dorchester County area, South Carolina. And I think that a lot of the younger guys do, maybe, it comes down to personal preference, obviously, but I think a lot of them want that big city experience. And I think some of them get turned off to it as well, kind of like Marner with Vegas or with Toronto and everything like that, because the media is a lot more ruthless in places like that. I think that if a player wants to have a true, honest to God, big city experience, they're not really going to get in Raleigh. And that's not me shitting on Raleigh. I love visiting, but I would never want to live there. But I'm not a city guy. I learned that from living in Northern Virginia that I don't like living, in cities or near big cities. That's why we're living basically out in the country now, or at least you could say out in the suburbs. It does seem like Carolina has some difficulty there sometimes, where there's exceptions to it. For example, Jake Gensel. I think he wanted to stay. It looks like he wanted to stay based on everything that I saw when all the smoke cleared from that particular situation, and the front office dragged its feet and fucked it up. So Dan Collapsing 99 says, I feel like this kind of throws Marner out the window. Yeah, if this happens, if they manage to move Hertl, then they're clearing that cap space for Marner. There's nobody else they would be doing it for. So Jesse says, I don't think we need another left shot forward. Probably not, but as long as someone else is going out to make this happen. As far as a center goes, whatever second line center Carolina can get, I don't think their handedness matters. Now, part of the reason why the handedness used to matter so much is basically you had the same 4 guys taking faceoffs the entire game back in the day. Whereas now it's like you're probably going to have 6, 7, 8 guys taking faceoffs the entire game, because you'll notice Jarvis takes them pretty frequently. When Steph Nason was with the Canes, he took them pretty frequently. And, that whole dynamic has changed as to where you have guys taking faceoffs now that didn't really do it regularly before, just because they're doing these set plays off the faceoff. You can choose what side of the ice you have the faceoff on after the other team's been given an icing call. There's a whole bunch of different things that go into that and everything. So as far as centers go, a right-handed one would be preferable, but if a better player that's left-handed becomes available, then you can't really tell it no. For example, even though this isn't going to happen, if Dylan Larkin became available, he's a left-handed shot. It would not stop Carolina from acquiring him for a player not as good as Dylan Larkin just because he's a right-handed shot. The most advantageous thing for Carolina would be to acquire a right-handed shot center. But those are hard players to get. So, Scott, what's up, dude? Hey, let's go. Tony D says, before I leave, people need to stop being pissed off at Tulsky because the day goes by without trade. I'm confident he is working overtime and working on the phones. I believe he is too. And there's a lot of people who say stuff about Tulski that I don't like. I saw one person, this dude's profile picture, if it was actually him, this motherfucker was like 300 pounds. And, I'm not as skinny as I would like to be. I'm getting there, though. That was calling him an autistic, unathletic nerd, and he's never played a sport. This guy picked up a hockey stick or a baseball bat, was maybe high school. And that kind of shit pisses me off. So, it's like they're sitting there criticizing this guy and saying, oh, he's never played before. And they wouldn't last 5 minutes in some of the fucking beer leagues I played in, much less the NHL. And they're going to criticize somebody else for being unathletic. So they can miss me with that bullshit. Matthew Brown says at Denver Card Show, it's because younger players want to be in the big market teams they've been growing up watching, and vets love it here because it's a great destination for them and raising their families. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's kind of what I was trying to say. I think a lot of young players do want that big city experience, because when I first got to the Washington metro area, I didn't mind living in a big city. In a lot of ways, I liked it. But then committed relationship plus dogs and higher cost of living starts to eat at you a little bit. It was different when I first moved there, and like all I did was like work overtime and play beer league. But then you start getting other things that take your attention and your time, like a family, albeit I only have 4-legged kids. That definitely plays a factor into it for a lot of guys. I think I can really see that happening. And, another reason I didn't move back to Raleigh is because it's basically New York and Boston now. So many people from up that way have moved there, and it's nothing against people from places like that. I have plenty of friends who relocated out of places like that to live somewhere like Raleigh. I just personally I'm a Southern guy. I want to be in a Southern environment. That's just me. That's why I live in South Carolina now. That's part of the reason why I live there. Av Clark says Marco Diamaco said 9 minutes ago it's in the smoke and he could be traded Saturday if it seems like a good fit. Hertl has not said no. Saturday's a long way off because today's Tuesday. All right. Well, yeah, we'll see what happens with this. I jumped on thinking maybe something would happen because I'm not doing anything else today. I don't work again until tomorrow. So I was hoping maybe something was coming. I mean, I was going to be on the computer today anyway, preparing some stuff for some other streams I'm doing, and we're tentatively planning to go live on Caniac sessions tonight as well. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, we got some more comments. Dylan Bollinger says people are already wanting to hang Tulski. Yeah, and that shit pisses me off. And if they think that Carolina's the only team using analytics, they have, like, Florida uses analytics extensively. And they just won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and they've been to the finals 3 times in a row. Like, everybody uses them. Dan Calypso 99 says, with Marner more than likely heading to Vegas, I feel like Robertson is someone we should push for. Absolutely. Robertson is that power forward 2-way winger type of player that Carolina could absolutely use. I remember, and my friend Jeremy will verify this, I remember a couple of years ago when I was like sitting there talking about like my dream team, if I could just put whatever team I wanted together and it stay under the cap, Jason Robertson was one of the top 5 players that I listed out of everybody that I would have on that team. Someone like him playing with Aho would be great, because what they really need, the team, the forwards, at least you could say, essentially are built around Aho. So any player that you acquire, you have to take into account, is this guy going to fit good with Aho? For example, if Carolina did land Marner, which it's looking less and less like that's going to happen, where does he go immediately? He's going with Aho. Now, granted, Aho and Jarvis have amazing chemistry. It's even better than what Aho had with Teravainen, for example. Still, a player of Marner's caliber, you put him with Aho. Like, it's just that simple. Jason Robertson would provide everything and then some that you were hoping to get out of Mikko Rantanen. So, absolutely, I agree with that. Do you think he would play well in our system? If whether you're talking about Robo or Hertl, I think either one of them would play against or play well in Rod's system. So, for what criticisms I do have of Rod's system, no system is perfect, and I think Rod's is really good for the most part. There's a couple of things I'd like to see different. I mean, instead of having man-on-man defense in the defensive zone, I wish they'd go to more of a hybrid style where it's man-on-man in the neutral zone, where there's a lot less space and you can force the team to go offside, make their entries harder, and then transition into more of a zone hybrid box type of defense in the defensive zone, and maybe not wear your legs out so much trying to suppress shots and still take away the middle of the ice a whole lot. That's something I would like to see different. I would like to see some of the more offensively minded players given a little bit more room. And one of the good examples that I have of that is like Taylor Hall's breakaway goal against Washington in the playoffs. I want to see plays like that more often because there is so much speed with the Hurricanes. You can get away with those. Hey, let me take 1-2 steps early and maybe be able to create some separation, get on a breakaway, get away from the other team's defense, get in behind them and get on a breakaway and, score like Taylor Hall did in that situation. I think that, Carolina, since they put such an emphasis on speed and everybody having wheels, they could absolutely make changes like that and play better. Rod is a great coach. I'm not pretending that he's not. Like people are saying, fire him, he sucks. No. Needs to make adjustments. Yeah, but nobody coaches an NHL team for as long as he has without having to make adjustments. And he has made a lot of adjustments. For example, once upon a time, Rod didn't have 4 forwards and 1 defenseman on the power play. The power play one, when he first took over, was Dougie Hamilton and Jacob Slavin out there with him. So there's that to consider as well. He has changed some things that he does. Does he need to change a little bit more? Yeah. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying and what I'm doing is completely inconsequential. It's Rod's reputation and paycheck that's on the line whenever he makes a decision. So there's a lot more pressure to it. This is a glorified version of playing NHL 25, what I do on here. What I say and what I think is ultimately inconsequential. I enjoy interacting with people. I enjoy talking about hockey, and I really enjoy people, coming in here and, giving their opinions on everything and us having these discussions and everything. But at the end of the day, Rod's decisions really only affect, or as far as people who are affected by Rod's decisions, it's the Hurricanes organization and by extension, the fans, because we want to see the team win and everything. But at the end of the day, his job is incredibly difficult. And yeah, he makes bad decisions sometimes, but he doesn't make bad decisions because he wakes and says, oh, this is a terrible idea, let's do it. That's not what he does. I just think he makes small game management mistakes. I don't understand some of his line choices at times. Like for example, when the season was on the line, they pulled the goalie for the extra attacker against Florida in Game 5. I don't know why Martinook went out there instead of Stankoven. That didn't make any sense to me. And people were arguing with me online saying, well, it's because he was out there to defend. Someone said Martinook was out there to defend the blue line. I'm like, that wasn't a worry about defending the blue line situation. Like, that's a let's tie this game and keep our fucking season going situation. Martinook's not the guy you put out there for that. Now, if you have the lead and you're trying to protect it, that's when you put Martinook out there. But that was a time where you needed somebody who had a little bit more offensive upside up there. And I would say Taylor Hall should have been out there, but he had just come off the ice. So that, if it were up to me, Stankoven would have been out there instead of Martinook. And I love Martinook. So Denver Card Show says, I love a lot of what Tulsky has made, but it's tough for me not to blame him for the Mikko situation. But he did spin that into lemonade. He got a good lesson in not trusting agents. Yeah. Tulsky learned a lot of hard lessons with that whole situation. And the best part about it is he learned them early in his tenure. When you learn hard lessons and you learn them early, essentially Tulsky was in his infancy as being a general manager, and he learned a lot of hard lessons very quickly. So that's a good thing. Like, get it, the old saying is, if you're going to fuck up, get it out of the way early. And that's what he did. So he learned those lessons now, not have to learn them later. So he's taking that experience into the future. And it's something he learned now as opposed to 3-4 years from now. So Denver Card Show says, great stream, by the way. I followed after I found you on Twitter this morning. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Rolling says, great stream. I'll be back. Thank you. I appreciate it. My defense to fire Rod is who you're going to get. There's not a single coach better for our team than Rod. Yeah, people are acting like that there's just other coaches laying around. Now, people misconstrued, and they did it on purpose. People misconstrued some of the stuff I said at the end of the 23-24 season before Rod's contract extension was renewed. Me and my buddy Sam Driscoll were on here talking about some stuff, and we were talking about, well, who do you bring in the event that Rod doesn't come back, even though we all knew he was coming back. But let's just say, for sake of argument, sake of discussion, that Rod decides, hey, I'm done coaching. I'm just going to go coach my kid, or I'm going to go coach somewhere else, or I'm going to become a truck driver, whatever. And if you understand that reference, it has to do with that movie over there. In the event that that had happened, then we talked about who you would potentially replace him with at that point. And, one of the names that I threw out there was Jay Woodcroft, because I was like, I would be interested to see what Jay Woodcroft, a coach, and I think he's a good coach, what he would have done with a team that was not so top heavy like Edmonton was, because Edmonton is heavily reliant on their forwards. And we know the two that they're the most heavily reliant on. That's no secret. What would a guy like Jay Woodcroft do with a team that had a little bit more depth, was a little bit more balanced, and that you could rely more on the guys in the bottom six, rely on your defensemen a little bit more and everything like that? I would be curious to see what a player like that, or what a coach like that would do with a more rounded, balanced lineup. That was not me advocating to move on from Rod and get Woodcroft. That was not me saying that. It was just a hypothetical of, hey, what if Rod doesn't want to come back? Now, one thing I think that should ultimately be considered, and I like Jeff Daniels, I like him a lot, but Tuomo Ruutu, and now this, people are going to say I'm biased about this because everyone who knows me knows that Tuomo Ruutu was my favorite winger of all time other than Justin Williams. He's been the assistant coach for the Florida Panthers for the forwards, and he's done an excellent job with that team, and, you know, kind of speaks for itself. Three Stanley Cup finals, and they won 2 of them in a row. So, you know, if he became available, and he's more recently removed from actually playing the game than Jeff Daniels, maybe that's something that you look at. And Rod and Tuomo Ruutu definitely know each other. They played together for a while. So I think that that's something that maybe could be considered in the future. In the event that he becomes available, maybe Carolina asks permission to speak with him. You know, it's like, I think there's some sort of change there. Now, as far as Tim Gleason goes, Tim Gleason's done a great job. I don't think any changes need to be made there. Carolina has a great penalty kill. It's consistently at the top of the chart. It's usually number 1. 5-on-5 defensively, they're great. Like I said, I think they could make a couple of changes, but that's not because the man-on-man defense is ineffective. It's because it's atrocious. It wears the team out. I definitely think that there's a fatigue factor that comes in because of the man-on-man defense, even with the emphasis that the Hurricanes place on conditioning and strength. I think that there's a fact. I think that is a factor. That's just my personal observation from watching nearly every single game since 1997. Not every single game, because like there were, you know, times where when I was in the military, I was deployed and I didn't get to watch every game. Luckily, the half season occurred while I was deployed, so I was back by the time that it really got in full swing. But the thing about it is, it's like hockey is harder to play now than ever. There's a bigger pool of players playing now than ever. There's more people trying to make it now than ever. And it's not like in football where essentially everybody is coming from the United States. In hockey, you have Canada, Finland, Sweden, United States, Czechia, so on and so forth. So many different places that all these players are coming from. Then occasionally you have a German or a Slovakian or a Lithuanian, whatever in there. So when you go down to leagues like the SPHL, which is what I grew up watching, now that's hockey I've actually watched more than the NHL, because I've always watched the NHL, but I didn't really get into it until after I left home. What I was really into was the SPHL. That's why, you know, that Fire Ants thing over there, it has the name of the entire inaugural Fayetteville Fire Ants team. Every single one of them signed it. That's what I grew up watching. And that's what the NHL looked like. What that league looks like now is what the NHL looked like 15 years ago. And there is a fatigue factor in it, especially when you're talking about they play 82 games. They have the longest schedule in professional hockey. They play the same amount of games the NBA does. They only play half the games that baseball does, essentially. But, you know, when it comes to physically arduous sports, I love baseball, but it's not nearly as difficult as hockey is. And I think that a fatigue factor probably sets in hockey more than it does anything. Now, if football players played 82 games, that would be a problem. But they only play 16. Or if they get to the Super Bowl, they play 20. So hockey probably has a bigger attrition and fatigue factor than any other sport, at least of the big 4. So I think that that's something else that needs to be considered with maybe making some changes so they got a little bit more left in the tank when they get to the playoffs, because there are times where they just look worn out. Like when they played against Florida in 22-23, I think Carolina was the better team in that ECF. And Bobrovsky was the ultimate difference maker, because if it wasn't for Bobrovsky, I don't think Florida wins that series. Credit to him and credit to the team in front of him for not letting his effort go to waste. But by game 4, Carolina looked absolutely gassed in that series. And I think that that's part of the reason why. I mean, the multiple overtimes that they played in game 1 and 2 combined also was a factor in that, but it seemed to affect Carolina much more than it did Florida. And I think that's part of the reason why Carolina has some of the shortcomings it has in the playoffs. So I think that if they make small changes, you don't need to make big ones. You don't need to fire the coach. You don't need to drastically change the system. You definitely need to improve the roster, but you don't need to do anything remarkably groundbreaking really, to get this team to go to the next step. And every team tries to improve their team to some capacity or another in the offseason when they're in the position that the Hurricanes are in right now, because they're in a good spot. So that's why I was hoping that maybe something happened here and that the Hurricanes were getting Hertl, but it looks like it's off for right now. Yeah, I haven't seen anything. If y'all have anything in the chat to say if you've seen anything else in regards to the Hertl trade, but it looks like there was smoke but no fire today. Saturday's a ways off, so see if I can see something else on here a little bit easier for me to keep up with stuff. Yeah, I mean, something could happen on Friday too, because the draft is on Friday. I was just making sure I had my dates correct there. So, speaking of the draft, Dylan Bollinger says Scott Wheeler has the Canes drafting Colin Potter. I could see that. Me and Matthew talked about that actually, where when we were profiling those 5 players, and him and I are going to profile some more come in, later on this week. I could definitely see them drafting him, but who I really want to draft is Mason West. Like me and Matthew came to a very, very solid consensus on drafting Mason West. Like, I think that kid's got a bright future. Maverick, cool name. I just got here, but I'd love Hertl for our 2C. The center market this offseason isn't great. Yeah, and the center market is one of those there's 2 markets that are never good. Or I'll even say 3. There are 3 markets that are never good. Top pair defensemen, top 6 centers, and goalies. Those markets, they have 2 modes, bad and worse. And we've seen that especially with the goalie market over the last few seasons. That's why it's like, months ago, me and Griff and AB were on Caniac sessions talking about it. Like, we're probably going to bring the same tandem of goalies back because there's not much out there. The goalie market is never good. And lo and behold, that's what has happened thus far. I'm not giving up on Kochekov yet, but like I said that he had to take the next step last year, and he did for half of it, and then he fell off a cliff. Kochekov is a good goalie. The upside to Kochekov is that we had the saying when I was in the Navy, I would rather have somebody I have to rein in than someone I have to kick in the ass to get going. Kochekov is definitely someone that has the former as opposed to the latter problem. He's got to rein some stuff in. And once he does that, he'll be a lot better off. But right now, he gets in his own head sometimes. Like, for example, when he came in relief of Freddie Anderson, he played well in that game. And I think part of the reason why he did was because he had to turn his brain off. He didn't have time to think about it. If Kochekov knows he's starting at morning skate, if someone tells him, hey, you're starting tonight, he's in the starter's crease and everything, then that's the entire day. Here's what I think he does. And I don't know the guy, but this is just my personal assessment of the situation. I think that when he's told he's the starter, he spends the entire day kind of thinking about it. It kind of gets into his head a little bit. Whereas he's in a situation where he has to go in and relieve Freddie Anderson at a moment's notice. He doesn't think about anything. He turns his brain off and he just goes. And when he turns his brain off and he just lets reflex and instinct take over, Kochekov harnesses that aggressive style of goaltending that he has really, really well. And I'm not the most well-versed on goalies. I've said that before. But what I definitely see with Kochekov, when he doesn't think, when he just turns his brain off and plays, he's a significantly better goalie. Now, another reason why I say that, I forget his name, but the guy who's the analyst for the Minnesota Wild, he was talking about Anthony Stolarz and somebody else. I don't remember. It was just some random regular season game I was watching a few years ago. He compared Stolarz and somebody else. I can't remember who it was. And he described one goalie as a battler, someone who kind of fights to see every puck, someone who's going to go out of his way to push somebody out of his way that's trying to screen him in front of the crease, and that he's going to be super aggressive. And then he described the other goalie as a technician, someone who's more about playing angles, anticipating where shots are coming from, and being where he needs to be before the puck gets there. And I was like, that's a great way to describe it. So I've always used that ever since. Like, this was 5-6 years ago that I remember watching this game and hearing this. And I don't remember who Minnesota was playing. I don't remember who won. I just remember that one particular statement and finding it incredibly profound. So Pat the Ref says, I do wonder what the future and goal looks like if 2-3 years from now. That has to be priority for Tulsky soon. Yeah, Freddie's not going to play forever, and Kochekov, if he doesn't take the next step, they got to figure something out. Kuzayev, I mean, goalies are really, really hard to project. It is so difficult to their development is so weird compared to everybody else. And goalies always described it's like you're playing a different sport within a sport. So it's a game within a game. And their development timeline is different. It's harder to project how they're going to turn out. And I think they're a little bit harder to judge analytically in some cases, even though you can, narrow down high danger save percentages, mid-range save percentages, goal save above expected. There is all kinds of stuff you can do to kind of analytically understand a goalie. But then they have a bad game, and that all goes out the window. Or two of your defensemen are out, and your third pair is getting killed. All that goes out the window. There are so many different factors there. So I'll give it a few more minutes here to see if anything else potentially comes of what's going on with this Tomas Hertl thing. Since it looks like nothing is happening, I might go ahead and kill this stream and start working on some other stuff for later tonight. And tomorrow and a couple other days. I'll be working tomorrow, so you won't see me on here tomorrow, but I'm curious to know what's going on here. I really am. I don't think anything else is going to come of this today. Either that or the moment I kill this stream that something's going to happen. Dylan Bollinger says, to be fair, when PK played, we did seem to break down more in front of him than Freddie. Yeah, part of that comes from, like, when you have confidence in the goalie behind you, you tend to play a little bit more confident and less hesitation in your game and all that type of stuff. And then when you're worried about, for lack of a better term, babysitting your goalie, then it kind of affects everything that goes on from your goal line all the way to the other end of the ice. So there's that factor as well. But yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying there. All right, give this a couple more minutes. I'm going to take a screenshot of this real quick, though. Damn it. Yeah, I don't think anything's going to come of this one today. I hate to say, I don't want to say I jumped on here for nothing because I've enjoyed talking to y'all, and I haven't streamed in a while. And like when I don't do it for a while, I feel like I kind of get out of practice and I kind of like start fucking up a lot more and everything. But now I'm like, I feel like I'm back into it. So it's going to be a little bit easier for me to get some other stuff done on here today. Then if I get this job that I'm applying for, I got to figure out what my new work schedule is going to be and everything like that. Dylan Bollinger asked, you don't have any Nikishin footage from the Panther series? No, I do not. I didn't record any of those games, unfortunately. But yeah, the Nikishin videos, the breakdowns and everything like that, I'm going to do more of them. It's just like I just needed a break. You know, I don't make any money to do this except for the donations I get, which I'm very grateful for and everything like that. But like, I've kind of enjoyed just taking a break from everything because when we moved down here, I was going to try and get a job immediately. And then I decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to chill out for a little bit. I've done nothing but work for basically every single day nearly since, not every single day, but out of, say, a calendar year, I maybe took 40 days off, 50 days off, something like that on average, between being in the military and the civilian job that I had and working 2 jobs at one point when I was in Northern Virginia and everything. So I didn't really have a whole lot of time to just kind of chill out and relax. So I decided, and my girlfriend did the same thing. We got down here and we decided, you know what, for a few weeks, we're just not going to do anything. So I chilled out for a little while, then I grabbed a part-time gig, and then I'm going to have a full-time one here soon probably. And I decided to take a break from the streaming stuff too, because even though I don't make money for this yet, I do see it as an obligation that I need to, if I'm going to dedicate time to it. I want to do things correctly. And the last couple of things I put together, I didn't like them, and I scrapped them entirely. For every 1 minute of pre-recorded footage you've seen on my channel, there's 3 or 4 minutes worth of bloopers. Like I'm sitting there like, making something, and then, I'm sitting there saying something, I step on my words, I'm like, fuck. And then next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I got to start this over. Whereas when I do lives, it's just kind of like I just turn my brain off and do it. Kind of like Kochekov. So Dylan says, I still think about that pass to Stanky, two big pieces of our future. Yeah. Like that was very precise puck movement on the part of Alexander Nikishin there. He's going to have a little bit of everything. He's going to provide you some offense, especially on the power play, a lot of, decent amount of goals. He's going to provide a lot of good playmaking, puck distribution, and everything like that. Physicality, which this team desperately needs. So Chris Johnson said, I think the biggest monetary offer for Mitch Marner might come from Carolina. Yeah, if Marner doesn't come here, it's not because, we've heard this before with, trying to get Mikko Rantanen to extend with the Canes. If Marner doesn't go to the Canes, it's not because of money. But if he takes a little bit of a pay cut compared to somebody else, which he wouldn't, I don't think, to come to Carolina to maybe have a chance to win. Like I said, my concern with Marner was that the contract wouldn't age really well. And it was a lot of risk to spend $14 million on a guy like that when it's a little bit of a mystery box. Now, if you were talking $14 million for 3 or 4 seasons, that I would be a lot more open to doing. But I do think the Canes will land Ehlers. I do see that happening. And both those guys would fit well in the system, especially Ehlers. Ehlers wouldn't really have to change anything about his game coming to Carolina. Marner would probably have to adjust his game a little bit. Ehlers, on the other hand, he'd be kind of ready to go on day one, to be perfectly honest about how all that would work. So all right, guys. I don't think anything else is going to come of this particular venture here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, and let me see what else there is here. Mr. Slowdangle says Ehlers is just another small top 6. He's not that small. He's actually 6 foot. And I think he's like 182 pounds or something like that. I don't know off the top of my head, but I disagree with that a little bit. It's like you can still add a player like Ehlers who makes the team better and still potentially go get someone with some size like Robertson. Ehlers is someone I think you add either way. And it's not just about now, it's also about the future. And like I said earlier in the stream was, Ehlers is one of those guys with the way that he plays. When he gets older and his offense goes away a little bit and he's not as fast as he is, then you can drop him down to the 3rd or 4th line potentially, and he'll still be an effective player. He can still kill penalties, all that type of stuff. So, like, it's not just about signing Ehlers for next season and the season after that. It's looking at it long-term is the biggest reason I would like for the Canes to get Ehlers. And I think he's a pretty consistent player. So that's my big thing about why I'm really advocating for Carolina to get Nikolai Ehlers. It's about the long term as far as he's concerned. So that's the other thing with that. Dylan Bollinger says nothing will happen until during the draft hunt. That's what it's looking like right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear anything else about this again until Friday, or what I'm really afraid of happening is Hertl gets traded somewhere else. But yeah, right now it's looks a little bit weird right now. Everything does. So I guess that this isn't going to happen the way that it looked like it was going to, because this looked like something was about to go down and then it didn't. So this isn't the first time the Hurricanes have tried to get Ehlers either. We've been linked to Canes have been linked to Ehlers for years. I remember back in the shortened 1920 season at the start of it, Winnipeg actually offered up Ehlers for an unnamed right-handed defenseman. And back then there was only one option of who that could have been. That was definitely Brett Pesce that they were probably looking to acquire in exchange for Ehlers, and Carolina said no. I would say that, and then there was also when they tried to trade Natchez to Winnipeg the first time. Ehlers was supposed to be part of the return, and then that trade broke down and just ended up being Carolina sending Dylan Coghlan the other way, and I was happy to see him leave. As everybody knows, I didn't like him. Carolina's been linked to Ehlers multiple times because of how well he would fit. So that's just the thing. Like, is he gigantic? No, but he's not like sub 6 foot small or anything like that. BTS says, I still kind of want Marner over Hertl. Dylan Bollinger says, someone said that Colin Potter is the fastest skater in the draft, so maybe that's why he is our top pick. Yeah, Carolina loves their speedy boys, that's for sure. And that's one of the things that me and Matthew talked about was when, it would be a very on-brand draft pick for the Canes to get someone like Colin Potter. I'm still on the Mason West train. And not much of anything is going to pull me off that. I really hope that's who Carolina drafts. And his draft stock has gone up a whole lot now because he was also playing football too. And he decided to commit to hockey. Like, that's how athletic that kid is. The two sports he could potentially end up playing professionally. And he chose hockey. So that tells you something. Let's see. Elliot Friedman tweeted something. Let's see. Nashville hired Luke Richardson for an assistant coach. So that's not relevant to what we're concerned with. All righty, boys. I'm going to go ahead and kill this stream here. And I will, if anything happens, I'll try to jump back on and everything like that. Keep an eye out for something from us over on Caniac Sessions later today, potentially. We'll see what happens with that. But I'm going to go work on some stuff so I can get some other streams ready to go here in the future. Because after July 1st, I'm not going to be on here a whole lot for a while because I'm going to be, getting used to my new job and all kinds of other stuff like that. So y'all take care. Thank you for joining me and everything like that. We'll see if anything comes of this later. I will see you next time.